Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh,
Good morning.
good
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Today is the first Monday of May. May the 1st be with you. And today we have an exciting topic at hand. We are going to be talking about wrath. I once read a book in high school called The Grapes of Wrath. It has nothing to do with this. I don't remember the book, but I read it. Who's that by? Did you read that book?
Yeah,
Who's it by?
I forget.
Is it Larry Fitzgerald?
No, that's
That's a football player. Scott
yeah.
Fitzgerald is Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
Larry Fitzgerald has nothing to do with this. Sorry. Today we'll be talking about the wrath of man, wrath in general. So you do not want to miss out on this episode. Today is the first Monday of May, and you are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene and Chunseok today.
I
Chunseok is
am
back.
John Steinbeck.
Who is that? Is that the? Oh, he wrote The Pearl.
No, the Grapes of Wrath.
Wait, The Pearl is also a book that I read. Who's that by? The Pearl is by John Steinbeck. I was right,
I wrote both, yes.
but it's actually a novella.
Which means novel.
Wait, what? No, I think novella is shorter. Yeah,
Are you sure?
yeah, like telenovela. You know what that is?
Mm.
It's on Univision. Wait, what's that Spanish channel?
Telemundo.
It's a shorter TV.
Novella is a shorter novel. Gotcha. Anyways, we are with Pastor Eugene and Chunseok, who's back with us. Thank you so much for coming today. Today we'll be talking about wrath. Dang, The Pearl only got 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was a good book. That's rough. Anywho, today we'll be talking about wrath. And this is one of the 7 deadly sins as tradition would have it. I know that the church in its tradition has the 7 deadly sins, and wrath is one of them. I wanted to read for us a couple different verses concerning wrath. And I think when we think of wrath, we just think of God's wrath. But there are many verses concerning the wrath of man. And the first one that I want to read for us is Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 to 32. And that reads, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you." Another one is Psalm 37, verse 8. "Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil." And another one, Colossians chapter 3, verse 8 reads, "But now you must put them all away, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth." And so this is one of the questions that I've had reading the Bible. When we talk about the wrath of man, what are we talking about? It seems to be different from anger, because it's anger and wrath, right? So what are we talking about when we read about the wrath of man, and how would the Bible define it?
Yeah, when it talks about not being angry, it's obviously not saying that you shouldn't be angry at all, or anger in itself is sinful. And so there is a way to understand anger, because God does get angry. And I think this is why people are confused, where, you would have maybe heard that in the Old Testament, God was angry, and in the New Testament, God is love.
People always distinguish OT verse and T God.
Yeah, which is not a thing.
Right.
God doesn't change from the OT to the NT, and he is the same forever. So the wrath that he has is still justified, and it is a good anger. I mean, it's not a sinful anger, because God doesn't sin. But when we talk about when you say wrath of man, or when the Bible talks about or is referring to our anger, it is talking about a sinful anger. That is I guess it's a derivation of other types of anger, but this would be a sinful anger.
So wrath is anger then, because the thing that I was asking was, it seems like in the passages at least that I read, there is a distinction between anger and wrath.
So wrath can be good wrath too. Can I give you a passage where it is? Maybe Romans 12:17-19.
Romans 12:17-19 reads, "Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord."
Yeah, so in that verse 19, the word wrath is used, right? And so, I would say, even in the King James Version, it says, give place to wrath. I know in the ESV version, it says, give place to the wrath of God, right?
But leave it to the wrath of God.
Leave it to the wrath of God. Yeah. When King James just talks about just wrath in general. So there is a wrath that is good, right? And so in the end, what are we talking about when we try to distinguish between wrath and sin? I think the defining of terms is very important.
Yeah.
Right? In anything, you need to define terms. And so when we talk about a sinful kind of anger, that's what I think you mean by wrath of man, a sinful kind of anger, because there is a good wrath that even we can possess and hold.
So that's my question then, I guess, because, in this Romans 12 verse, the wrath is the wrath of God, which we know to be perfectly just, perfectly holy, perfectly good, because God is just, holy, and good. But the wrath of man, how is it different? And in what way would that ever be a good thing?
Yeah, it's the same thing when, let's talk about love, because anger and love is connected. This is something that Tim Keller actually famously said. Anger is a form of love. Anyway, but anger is connected to love. Love is a good thing, yes?
Yes.
Love can also be a bad thing, yes?
Yes.
It depends on how you define love, yes?
Yes.
So love corrupted is a bad thing. So anger corrupted in that same way, in the same vein, is a bad thing. So anger is a good thing then. Anger is a good thing. And this is something that we need to kind of step away from, just kind of black and white painting anger just simply as a bad thing. Anger is a good thing. Even in the Bible, Paul is admonishing his readers, anger and do not sin. So sinning is the bad thing. So you can be angry and sin. There can be a sinful kind of anger or sinful expressions of anger, and that's what we need to watch out for.
So in the verses that we read earlier today, especially Ephesians 4 and Psalm 37, I just have two questions. It does seem like wrath and anger are distinct. In Ephesians 4, it says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice." And in Psalm 37, it says, "Refrain from anger and forsake wrath." It seems to be two distinct things. Are these two distinct things? And even in this scenario here, I know that you said that there is good anger and obviously sinful anger, but here it just says anger. And so how do we make sense of that?
I think we need to put things in context. The Bible won't say this is a good anger or a bad anger. It will just say, let's say in Jonah, Jonah was exceedingly angry in Jonah chapter 4.
Yeah.
And it's a bad thing because you see it in context, right? He's not angry in a good way. He's angry in a bad way. I think the pretty amazing part about anger just by itself is that very rarely do we see depictions of anger that is good or righteous. It's really mostly bad. So I think the question I would probably ask is there any good depictions of anger that humans can have? Because it seems as though for the most part, anger is depicted or expressed in sinful ways. And so when we talk generally about anger, we can talk and say, don't be angry. because for the most part, people express their anger in a negative way
Or they say, you mad bro. Right.
to get people even more angry.
And it works. It makes me furious.
Yeah.
It's
You
best
say
when-
that to yourself, huh? So it's just a vicious cycle.
It's a repeating cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in the end, you'll go through the same thing with boasting. Let's say when the Bible says, do not boast, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bible says, have your boast in God. Whoa, I thought you said don't boast.
Gotcha.
So I
Okay.
think context is very important. So
Okay.
when it's talking about boasting, it's talking about a sinful boast. And I can point it to very simply, whether it's boasting, whether it's love, whether it's wrath. The sinful part is it doesn't point to what is good. It's actually pointing to
I
the
see.
self.
Okay.
Um,
So even like the why you're angry.
yeah.
Okay.
So, or the expressions of anger. I wanted to say the expressions of anger because the why you get angry could be justified. Let's
Okay.
say, so this is the difference between human anger and godly anger. I would say one of the differences. Let's say something really bad happens to someone you love, Sam.
Mhm.
I'm not going to name anybody because you might get angry. But let's say you love someone dearly.
Yeah.
It's a family member, and something really unjust happens to them. And then you get really angry. Is that justified? Absolutely. If something unjust and evil happens to someone you love, you getting angry is very, very normal. In fact,
Yeah.
if you didn't get angry, that would be weird. However, in your anger, you black out. You know about blackout anger, right?
No.
So you get so angry that what happens next, you black out, meaning it's not under your control. It's like getting blackout
Is
drunk.
that real?
For Chunzug, it is.
No.
You
But I think
keep-
people with anger management issues, they always describe it as they lost control.
But
or-
that's a real thing. Because I mean, I've gotten angry to a point where I say things that I regret saying, but can I really
that's
say?
like that's a dimension or degree of that blackout anger. Blackout anger, you would think is, don't get me angry because you'll regret if I get angry, or if someone threatens you like that. What they're saying is, you won't be able to control me once I become angry because, in effect, I can't even control myself, or I'm going to do things that I would never do unless I was angry. Something to
Okay,
that effect.
Okay.
So I'll just dub it blackout anger for purposes of this podcast, but it really means I lose control of myself. Now, the anger that you have may be justified, but the expression, meaning you blacking out and doing things that you can't even control, is that justified? And the answer is no, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, very rationally speaking, if you do things that you can't even control, isn't that sinful, right?
Right.
So when you get inebriated, we're saying that it's a sin because you can't control yourself fully, and you'll do things that you won't have control over, because one of the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. And so you want to be able to control yourself so that you can push yourself or control yourself to the degree where you live a life of sanctification. Now, if you black out to whatever degree, for whatever reason, if there is a blacking out or you're losing yourself, that is not a good thing.
Okay.
No matter how appealing Eminem makes it, but that's unnecessary.
Oh, he says, lose yourself in the music the moment you own it. You
Yes.
better never let it go.
Mom spaghetti.
Yeah. Arms weak.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to emulate that song, all you have to do is scream out spaghetti over and over again, and people will get it.
That's a very like that. Dun, 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 dun. That's very hype. Chunzuk loves that because he's an elect player.
Spaghetti.
But so just to be clear, anger and wrath are the same thing or they're not the same thing? Or how would you define, how would you distinguish between anger and wrath? Because it seems like the Bible does so.
Yeah, it seems as though we have to put it in context if we're going to explain it. Anger and wrath. Wrath would probably be something that we want to leave to God, saying, so in our vernacular today in 2023, we say God's wrath. We normally don't say God, in God's anger we will be punished, because what that kind of symbolizes in our culture or in our language is that God kind of lost control of himself and he's just punishing us in rage, in his like blind rage. Ooh, that's another word we can use. Blind rage.
Blind rage.
Blackout anger. Right. And so God doesn't have blind rage. He doesn't have blackout anger. In his wrath, he is in complete control. But it is something that is completely justified and it is not sinful. Now, when we talk about our anger, a lot of times what we are necessarily referring to is we don't have control. I'm so angry. I'm going to do things that are over the top, things that I wouldn't necessarily do if I were not angry, meaning I don't have control of my faculties. I'll say things that I would never normally say, but I'll say things really over the top and mean, like, Sam, you're so small, or something like that when I'm really angry.
But it's not true.
It can be. It's just to a degree, right? It's just that accentuation of a weakness that I normally wouldn't do.
That's not my weakness.
Oh, you were about to say I don't have a weakness.
Yeah, that was close.
So anger is very much like pride when you say things like, I don't have a weakness. No, but anger is very much like pride.
Yeah.
If I may take the segue, because it's so widespread, it's so pervasive, but it's also subversive in the sense that a lot of people are proud and they don't know that it's pride. A lot of people are angry, but they don't know that they're actually being manipulated through anger.
Gotcha. So wrath is something that God gives in his perfect self-control, and that is something that we do not do. Correct? To summarize?
I mean, that's why we distinguish language, because if we say wrath and wrath, it might be confusing to a lot of people. This is good wrath, this is bad wrath, right? You know what I mean? So that's why I think we distinguish the terms, but the terms itself isn't really different.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Gotcha. Okay. Then I'm wondering, I think most, if not all of us, struggle with anger. Maybe we don't all black out anger, but I think a lot of us, we do have regret for the things that we do, for the things that we've said, for the things that we've thought in our anger. And so just a couple questions on anger and just kind of the management of anger management, if you will. How do you distinguish between righteous anger and sinful anger? And also, if we are angry, what is a holy way, a God-honoring way of not being angry anymore? Because I think oftentimes people are like, you got to let it out, go hit the punching bag or whatever it might be. But I don't know if that's really the healthiest thing to do, always releasing your anger physically.
Actually, there are studies done that it not only doesn't help, it exacerbates and makes your anger problems worse. So there are these rooms that were popular like a few years ago where you can just destroy things.
What?
Yeah. So you can take like a bat and there's like a bunch of desks and you can just go ham. Ham obviously means turkey. And so
ham is the top of
and so it means that you can, it's a place where you can express like all your anger and rage, and you could take it out on chairs and things like that. People are like, you should let loose. So that's the philosophy behind it. But now we know it actually doesn't make your anger better. You can have a quick release. But in fact, your self-control has gone down. So the next time, guess what? You'll be even more angry.
Right.
So those things actually are destructive to the soul as well as useless items that they brought into the room. But it is not a good thing to go into those anger rooms.
So then how do you first distinguish between righteous anger and sinful anger?
Good. I think that's a good question. When we talk about anger, we're talking about an emotion. And emotion is immediate. Let's say something, I don't know. Let's say you break your phone.
Okay.
You immediately have grief or sadness or whatever it is. You have an emotion. The emotion hits you right away. Anger in the same way is an emotion that will hit you right away. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily something that you should continue to feed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So just because you're sad, it doesn't mean you should continue in your sadness. A lot of the emotions that hit us immediately The thing about self-control and the thing about sanctification is whatever hits us immediately, we need to be able to distinguish whether this is of sarx or if this is of, pneuma.
So sarx is flesh, pneuma spirit, right?
And so we want to be able to distinguish between, is this a fleshly desire that I have, or is this of the Holy Spirit, this emotion that hits you? And so when I sing, great is thy faithfulness, and I am overcome with gratitude and emotion, that's immediate too. I think that's a good thing. But I can also take a step back. Is it a good thing that I am overcome with this emotion of gratitude and even almost a sadness because it's something I don't deserve, right? And I'm just full of gratitude. The second part is when I flip that to, let's say, my phone breaking, and I immediately get angry, I need to take the step back, but is this a righteous kind of anger? So there was a time I was walking down one of the main streets in Englewood, and I tried to put my phone in my pocket, and it slipped out of my hand. It didn't go in my pocket, and it went straight to the concrete floor, right? And I immediately got angry. You know why? Because that was the one day I didn't have my case on. Oh. So it always happens. It's a little more slippery. I think people can relate.
Yeah.
It's that one day I didn't have the phone case on. It's a nice brand new phone. It slips and it hits the floor. And now it's scuffed. And immediately I got angry. And then there is an expression because, you're angry. So, you name a bunch of flavors of ice cream.
Vanilla.
Yeah. And then, you pick up your phone and you put it back in your pocket and you walk along. But that's when you catch yourself and you're like, whoa, do I continue to feed this anger? And I guess it's not really that much. There is no real reason to be angry. Plus, it's my fault for not putting on a case sooner. And you start thinking about that stuff. But the expression is so immediate. This is why this is so dangerous. The expression is so immediate that unless you work on that self-control, it's so fast you've already sinned in your anger. Meaning as soon as the phone hit the floor, you went fudge sickles or whatever it is, right?
I imagine you screaming chunky monkey, but that's just me.
So I didn't scream anything. But I was, upset.
Yeah.
But let's say, that's a process of sanctification. I wasn't always just like upset. Maybe like 10 years ago, I would have screamed chunky monkey or fudge sickles or, vanilla.
Yeah.
But even 10 years prior to that, I would have screamed something else. And so there is a process that takes place, and that's the process of sanctification, because you want to go more and more towards, the sanctified life. So you don't want to stay in a place where if you drop your phone, immediately an expletive comes out. So that's what I really want to get at. I want to get at that anger is at first glance an emotion, and that emotion must be controlled.
So, people have different views on how you're supposed to diffuse the situation or diffuse yourself, I guess. And we talked about, like you said, going to a punching bag, right? Punching your pillow or whatever it might be, kind of translating into this physical release. But then also other people like go to their pillow and they scream in their pillow for that release, right? And I think even people shouting expletives, whatever it might be, is for that momentary release, if you will. Is that a bad thing? How are Christians supposed to diffuse themselves in a sense? How are Christians supposed to handle their anger? Because like you said, I think if I had dropped my phone, not being angry is much further down my path of sanctification. I think the anger is immediate, but I don't want to express it and I don't want to sin in my anger. So how is a way that I can not sin in my anger?
I think you brought up all these examples of anger that actually point to one type, and that is an anger in your helplessness.
Okay.
So all the examples that you just brought up is because you're so angry and you feel helpless. The outlet that you have is to express it through another channel.
Right.
Screaming in your pillow has nothing to do with what made you angry in the first place. So
right.
you're actually not dealing with the issue. And so knowledge about that might help people when they get angry. So if I get really angry and I take it out on my wife will say, "Why are you taking out your anger on me?
Yeah.
How dare you?" Or something to that effect, right? Because that's not what the anger was for.
Right.
And so what originated the emotion in you? You know, what made you angry in the first place? And I think anger is a good thing when it's directed at the right thing. So I'll give you an example that you didn't use. Let's say someone is threatening your baby.
Okay.
Is threatening your baby, is holding your baby hostage. Should you be angry? I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
And in your anger, wouldn't you leap to her salvation or to save her or her defense? If someone's like running after your baby, wouldn't you immediately get angry or surprised or shocked, or that kind of emotion will get to you and that will propel you to action,
Right.
to defend?
Right.
That is a good kind of anger, because in the end, what it did was it promoted a good, right? Defending your baby is a good thing. Now, doing evil when you're angry is a bad thing. So defending your baby from evil is a good thing. When you get angry, and let's say because of, there's a bunch of stories now that you can find on the interwebs, if you choose to do so.
The webs.
Where, these school boards that are primarily made up of non-parents are promoting these LGBTQ, especially the T, agendas, and making like neutral bathrooms where boys can go in girls' bathrooms, and there's rape.
Yep, it's happened.
Sexual harassment.
Yeah.
All these things happening. As a parent who has had a child who has been victimized by this atrocity, these evils, should you be angry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should you take it to the town hall or the school board meeting? I think the answer is absolutely yes. Should you be angry in your expression? I think yes. You should show them how upset this makes you, because if it was happening, right there next to you, you would have ripped that guy to shreds.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. The second thing I would like to point out is, from that first thing, there is a base kind of foundational understanding of the righteousness of anger. So if you're thinking what makes anger righteous, what makes it evil, I think we need to start from the baseline. The baseline, I said before, is anger is from love. And what does that mean? It means that anger is the desire, or righteous anger is the desire to put things back into order. Sinful anger is the desire to put things into chaos. I think that's a nice black and white way of putting it.
Okay.
Because in my anger, am I putting things into chaos, or am I desiring to put things back into order?
Yeah.
Because God's wrath is order.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's always just. He doesn't put things into chaos where people are just going to, never have a way back. By him giving wrath and showing that this is actually the path you're going to, or, let's take one example of Pharaoh, how he hardened Pharaoh's heart. So R.C. Sproul puts this well, where he would kind of, make it faster. It's not like he put in depravity where Pharaoh didn't have depravity, but he hardened his heart, meaning his heart was already bad, and just did it faster so that he can show his glory through the plagues and things like that. It points to what? What does that all point to? It points to God. Mm-hmm. It points to the order that they're missing. It points to what was good that they're missing. All that stuff was there. And so if we keep that in the baseline, the end of your anger is chaos, then it's bad.
Okay.
And then, so if the end of your anger is chaos, then it's rough. If the end of your anger is God and what he is promoting, what the scripture says, because I can't simply say God, because we have people like Ted Kaczynski or the Unabomber or all these other people who thought they were doing God's work.
Yeah.
We'll say, I'm going to do this because so those things we don't approve of, because it's not in line with scriptural formations and, what it directs us to do. And so it needs to be scriptural, but that being said, I think we could simply say if it points us to God, if it points us to order, then the anger will be a good thing.
So then what is the righteous way of diffusing oneself? I don't know. I think, maybe the typical Christian answer would be to pray or to sing praises. But I don't know if people will be thinking about that the first second that they get angry. So, I mean, although those may be the correct answers, could you just, I guess, give us some pastoral wisdom and guidance and counseling on how we are to get to a place where we would be responding in prayer, or how we should even be responding to anger?
Yeah, I think knowledge is good when it comes to anger. Number one, I mentioned it before, but as soon as you're angry, take a step back, because for the most part, our anger has been corrupted, just like our love has been corrupted. And so we get angry not about the things that would, have the heart of God mourn or grieve, but it would be more towards this kind of self-aggrandizement. It's like this self-reflection. Like we're always pointing to the self. How dare they ruin my reputation? So it's really not in line with Jesus' footsteps when he was here on this earth. He was mainly concerned about God. So when he did get angry, what did he get angry about? It's his Father's house, right? And so that's something that we can think about. Number two, now that we've gone over that, I think, quite, not I guess overly exhaustive, but exhaustive enough. Number two, I would think that one thing that we should know is when you get angry and you cannot control yourself, you will be manipulated. So one of the chief ways or the primary ways that someone can control you is to make you angry. This was shown to us over and over again in the history, but I think most recently there's a group called Project Veritas, and what they do is they kind of secretly and even deceptively get people to share things. Like they'll go on like a date with one of the execs of a big company or pharma or CNN, and they'll just talk these, and then they'll get it on camera, and they'll pretty much expose the behind the scenes through like Pfizer. And so they did a bunch of that stuff. There was one that stood out to me that I remember, where this one CNN exec said, we're just going to promote this because this is going to get people angry, and that's why people are going to watch. So they manipulate people into getting angry, and then what's going to happen? They're going to actually watch more CNN.
Yeah.
I don't hide the ball on this, even in my sermons. So if you're listening to this for the first time, you're like, wow, Puge does not like CNN. Yeah, I do not like CNN. And so that's not something I'll hide. I think CNN always has shown their hand. It's just people who refuse to believe it won't believe it. They'll just deceive themselves. But this interview just put it out there. So if you don't believe CNN is doing this, I mean, I don't know what more evidence you would need. This is something that they're doing because they know. And people come back and say, well, every company does that to a degree. Absolutely. It doesn't make it right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why video games are so addictive is, number one, it does make you angry. It makes you angry. So let's say you're playing League of Legends, and when you die, it gets you so upset, you smash your keyboard. But guess what people do?
They play again.
They play again, right? And so anger is addictive because it manipulates you. And so when you easily give into your anger, you know that you're someone that is easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't have self-control. The power of self-control, the reason why it's such a wonderful gift, and it's a fruit of the Spirit, is that self-control puts you in a place where you are finally mindful, and then you can actually discipline and train your body and your spirit on the things that are good and holy, things that we've talked about over the past few podcasts, right?
Yeah.
And so number two, if you easily give into your anger all the time, know that you are easily manipulated, and that should be something to your shame, not something that you should be proud of. When someone is angry and it's rare and it's something that is measured, then you know that anger is heavy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then, even then, your anger is more effective then. So why would you continually give into your anger willy-nilly or easily? when you know that's something that you're going to get manipulated by. And number two, no one's going to take you seriously if you get angry all the time. They're just going to move away from you because you're just causing havoc and chaos, not putting things into order.
Yeah.
So the anger room that I mentioned before doesn't stay in the room. It goes out with you. So once you leave the room, the anger doesn't stay in the room. It leaves with you. So just because you did that doesn't mean that you got rid of your anger. I guess if you want me to continue, is that okay?
Yeah.
If you want me to continue, number 3 thing would be, if you're going to get angry, then imitate God. What makes God angry? Now, I'm not saying you should take a whip and whip up churches, because I don't think you know as much as Jesus knew about certain things, but there are evil practices out there, and I think we should call them out for it. And that's why I love things like the American Gospel, something that we have shown in our church, where we called out Word of Faith, Prosperity Gospel, the
RCC,
the charismatic movement that is just out of control. You call them out. You bring them to the light. You go through scripture with them.
Yeah.
And that's why we will continue to do so, even if it is quote unquote divisive, because the church needs to know what is the truth, and it's the truth that divides, not us calling it out.
When I said RCC, I meant Roman Catholic Church, not the denomination, the RCC.
There's no denomination called RCC.
Oh, it's
RCA.
RCA. Okay,
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was like,
just making sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's an ECC.
There's Ridgewood Coffee Company. That's RCC.
Yeah,
I
that's
do
true.
enjoy their coffees and tasty pastries. Yeah. So I think this is really helpful for us, because, we all struggle with anger to a certain extent. Were there any other points you wanted to mention? So then I'm curious. Let's just say that we want to work on our anger, that we want to be more self-controlled. We want to imitate God. How do we do? What's the first thing that we could do? Just because I think people may say, these are great things. I want to be like that. I want to be more like Jesus. I want to be more sanctified. How do we go about doing this? What is the first step that we should be taking?
Yeah, like any other sin, if you are given into a sin, you need to take it very seriously. So if you're easily given into anger, then it's more than likely you are in sin or in constant sin. For me, I'll give you one anecdote, I guess. It's a personal example. I decided to fast for 40 days for the first time in my life. And this was in my 20s. And this fast for 40 days wasn't just strictly water, because I thought that might be dangerous. It was just on liquids.
Yeah.
And a week or two into the fast, I found myself just getting really angry. Really angry. I would just grab onto the bedpost. That's how ridiculous it is. When you can't control your anger. When you look at it from a bird's eye view, you look just simply ridiculous, because here's this small man just getting angry, not being able to affect anything, really. He's just angry. He's trying to cause as much chaos, but how much chaos can you really produce? Because even the big ones, God is always the one that restores back to order. Anyway, I realized that my conviction to fast may have been primarily to deal with the anger issues I had. When I was a much younger man, I did get angry. When I got angry, I've noticed something, that people just left. People didn't stay beside me or try to calm me down or console me. None of that was actually happening. People would just leave. Perhaps, now that I look back, it's because in my anger, either I wasn't asking to be consoled, or I was just overly, like a bomb that's about to go off. Very, very unpredictable. And so there are people like that who in their anger just looks very unpredictable, like a powder keg ready to go off. You just don't want to be near it then, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've noticed. And then so in that fast, I think the Spirit of God really brought that sin out of me. Not that I don't get angry now, and not that my anger isn't something vicious now. I think it is. You could ask my wife. That's something that I deal with all the time. But that was one of the times where I realized and I saw, and God had helped me deal with a brunt of it, where, the anger was just ridiculous. It wasn't warranted, and it had a lot to do with pride and not love, or the love of self, right? Not love of others. And so, I think if you really want help, and whether it's any of these sins, whether it's gluttony or wrath or whatever it is, I think, and then you feel this conviction. My huge recommendation, I can't recommend it enough, is for you to fast. Fast with another brother if you're a brother. Fast with another sister if you're a sister, or have them pray for you as you fast as well, even if you're fasting alone. I'm not saying you should do for 40 days, but it needs to be. Very specific. It needs to be something that is, I don't want to say extreme, but it needs to be heavy, the fast.
Yeah.
None of this, like, I'm not going to watch Netflix. That's not what we're talking about. I'm saying, do a fast of food, because that's classically what we see in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the only time I wouldn't do a fast if it's food is if you're like struggling with anorexia. Then that's not a food fast. You need professional help too, though. But I think for the most part, you do a fast with food, and it could be the juice one that I did. It could be just water if it's like 3 days, I suppose. I did a 7-day one once where I just did water and diluted Gatorade. I think that was really tough. But if you're taking this sin seriously, then the fast is something that the Bible directs us to do. I would definitely consider fasting.
I think that's a great point to understand the severity and just the seriousness of your sin. And concerning the severity or the seriousness, I think oftentimes other people may think, well, I actually don't struggle with anger. I don't really get angry. I'm a little less severe. I get annoyed. And that's what I struggle with. I don't get angry. I don't get mad. I get annoyed. Does the Bible say anything about being annoyed? Is that a sin? Is that something that we need to be watching out for?
That's just a flawed expression of anger. You can be annoyed. I think one of the things that we always need to do is put it in context. So the context that I'm talking about is, let's say someone beats you in a hand of poker.
Okay.
I don't know why you're playing poker, but let's say someone beat you in a nice hand of cribbage, a nice cribbage, friendly card game without any money or gambling involved.
Unless you get skunked.
But you get annoyed.
Yes.
Measure the annoyance in context. Are you more annoyed that you got skunked or you lost in a game of cards than someone dying of hunger in the world? So I'm giving you an extreme example because sometimes we get so angry or annoyed. We get more annoyed at certain things that happen to us over the things that we should be upset about, like people dying of hunger.
Can we break that down really quickly?
Yeah.
I'm just realizing this now. Maybe this might be helpful. Can you just kind of break down the difference between upset, mad, annoyed? Like what? I know this is off the script, but just kind of what is being annoyed?
I think it's our way of depicting the degrees of anger. I think when we say anger, we are encompassing all of those. So even a little annoyance doesn't mean it's okay.
Right.
You can be annoyed a little bit at something that you shouldn't be annoyed at all. Does that make sense? And so it really needs to be put into context. You need to weigh it, measure it. I think the context part is important to me because one thing that I told people about gambling, since I mentioned it real quick, is gambling always makes you angry. That's why it's so addictive, because you never really win.
Yeah.
And there are people. There are always stories that people have. Oh yeah, I had my aunt-in-law that won like $50,000 all the time. It's like, no, I don't think so. But whatever. Yeah. You don't know how much they lost or how much they borrowed. You don't know how much they stole from someone else. I always take those stories with Not just a grain of salt, maybe like a whole bucket.
Oh.
But
Salty.
it's very salty. Morton sea salt. But in the end, it is about, I think, when you go, well, I don't know if you're familiar, but let's you go to a poker table or let's say a blackjack table.
Yeah.
And the
green
minimum
table.
bet is $5. You put $5 down,
Uh-huh.
and then you get your first hand and you lose. It's okay, $5, not a big deal. So I put another $5, and then you lose. That's $10. Now you're a little annoyed.
Yeah.
That's
a
when I
little
say
bit.
annoyed, right? And then I put another $5 down because minimum bet is $5. You lose again, 3 in a row. Is that? How can you lose 3 in a row?
Yeah. It's rough.
So you're a little more annoyed.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? I'm just going to make my $15 back. I'm just going to break even. So next bet, $15. And then you lose 4 in a row. So now you lost $30. Now your annoyance has gone to a level of just small rage. Small rage.
Yeah.
$30. You can't go back down to 5, but you don't want to keep on doubling down. So what you do is you bet another 15.
Oh.
And boom, you lose 5 in a row. It's like, forget it. I lost $30, $45. I'm just going to double down. So you put in $45 in the next bet. You can't lose 6 in a row, right? You lose 6 in a row.
You did though. Yeah, you did.
So forget it. I'm just going to win because I can't lose 7 in a row. I'm just going to double down. I'm going to put another, $90? And I'm just going to go home, break
don't
even.
do it. Don't
And you
do it.
lose 7
Don't
in a
do
row.
it.
So you lost in a matter of about 10 minutes, $180. I tell the story with detail because it actually happened to someone I know.
I'm angry listening to this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very invested. Wow.
Yeah. But it actually happened to someone I know.
Yeah.
I'm just going to bet $5. And they ended up, what's the most you can lose? A few bucks, right? They ended up losing $180 going back home after 10 minutes of play because they couldn't even afford the $180, but they lost it. And now we can translate that to whatever dollar amount you want.
Yeah.
It's always something that you think you can afford. $5 was the minimum bet table at the time, but even if it's $20 now, it's because you could afford. $20 is not that big of a deal to you, so you bet 20. But it never ends with 20. And that one time you bet $100 and you won, that's what you remember. But overall, the casino takes you. That's why there's the statistic.
House always wins.
Anyway, that being the case, I think that is one of the examples I like thinking about when it comes to anger. A lot of times, it's not like this huge thing that happens. It can be, like someone threatens your child. But how many times has your child been threatened?
Yeah.
Not that many.
Yeah.
Although it may go up with this whole like school stuff. But more than likely in the past, what has happened is those small things that continue to happen. It may not even be with money. It could be with cribbage. You could be playing with me, and I'm like, Junsuki, why did you let go of those 2 cards? It's a terrible, terrible decision. And every hand, I always criticize Junsuki's hand. That can build up, can it not, Junsuki?
Yes.
And so those things add up. And I think that's why, in that way, anger can be subversive. It just builds up. And so when you ask about annoyance, it is still an anger, but we're trying to dismiss it not as an anger. My point is, it's still an anger. And if I can discern it as such, then my guard will be up sooner rather than later.
So annoyance, which I would assume that, more people get annoyed than angry is what I would assume. Whether it's someone cut you off in traffic or whatever it might be, I think people tend to get more annoyed than angry. So being annoyed, we can identify and define as being angry. It's all under the same umbrella as anger, right?
Yeah, because it's all connected.
Right.
It's from the same root.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of attack that? I know that you mentioned it before, but how do we do, like, if I got annoyed at Chunseok because he punched me in the face, because he normally punches me with his words, but let's just say this time he punched me in the face. How do I, like, how do I not get annoyed? How do I handle my annoyance? How do I do that?
If he unjustly punches you in the face, I think you not getting annoyed is weird.
No, it was just, he said, let me undeviate your septum.
It was in the boxing ring.
Oh, you will never do it.
That's true. I heard that when you spar, a lot of people punch you in the face.
No, it's because I leave
Why do
it
you
out
let
there.
yourself get, yeah,
No, it's just I'm playing mind games.
by getting punched in the
No,
face?
because they overcommit on the jab and then I swing for the fences.
Do you
but-
get anybody with that?
No, I'm too kind. But so how do I work on that though? So like me being annoyed is very instantaneous. I can't help it. How do I work on that?
Join this temple called the Shaolin.
There's a show called Shaolin Showdown that I love. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I love that show.
No.
Oh,
Yeah, and then I always got to go back to, measure it with the righteousness of God. Is this what God gets angry about? And then put it in perspective. Number 2, put it in context. And if you put it in context, it might help. Because when you put it in context, a lot of times our annoyances or our anger is really reflective of our ego or our self-worth. We think of ourselves more than we ought. That's why our anger is disproportionate of what it should be. And so those are the things that I'll keep mindful of. Knowledge is good. Always reflecting is good. I think meditating is good. I would go back to what I said before, just as a reminder. If you feel like you are doing this, even outside of the boxing ring, you're just getting annoyed at every little thing. Someone cuts you off, you're getting annoyed, and you're just getting angrier and angrier. Let's say I'm driving up the street to church, and this car is going too slow, and you just cut him off, even though it's a double yellow. You just cut him off, and you yell, "Not today!" and then you cut him off.
yeah.
You might need to work on some of the anger. Not saying it's anybody here, or that's not a particular instance, like a specific instance.
I am the safest driver here though.
Yeah.
In this office, in this church, I think.
I think you're a very slow driver.
No,
It might be
safe,
dangerous.
No, no, I'm safe. I'm very safe.
You were going to say I go speed limit, but that's not true either.
I think I'm safe.
Get out of here. I think on the topic of anger, on the topic of wrath, there are many Bible verses against violence. And just, I just want to read maybe one or two. This is Proverbs 16. A man of violence entices his neighbor and leads him in a way that is not good. Proverbs 3. Do not envy a man of violence and do not choose any of his ways, for the devious person is an abomination to the Lord, but the upright are in his confidence. Psalm 11, the Lord tests the righteous, but his soul hates the wicked and the one who loves violence. And there are other verses regarding violence. And it made me think, in this topic, if we are to be against violence, if we're not to be violent, does this mean that we cannot enjoy violent things? For example, violent video games, Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, NBA 2K when I play Chunsok. It's very violent, gets destroyed. Football even, watching violent TV shows and movies, and even MMA and boxing. I know that my friend actually in seminary wrote a paper of how MMA is actually not glorifying to God because you are maiming, you are aiming to hurt another for sport, someone that is made in the image of God. And so if we are to refrain from violence, if we're not to envy the violent man or be like the violent man or desire to be the violent man, are we to stay away from these things? And if you're a Christian, should you not be an MMAer or a boxer?
That last one I'll answer first. If you're a Christian, you should learn boxing or judo or wrestling. Or actually, kickboxing is very nice.
Yeah, kickboxing.
Yeah, I think one of those four is very, very helpful. They're nice disciplines. I wouldn't really recommend kendo. Where are you gonna? You're not always gonna carry a stick.
Sword,
yeah.
yeah.
Like, hold on. Let me get my stick. I'll be right back. That being said, I think learning self-defense is a wonderful, wonderful discipline. I am all for it. I would promote it. If our church could do it, I would still promote it. the reason why the Bible talks about violence is I think violence is separated from learning self-defense, just like murder is separated from killing.
Okay. Yeah.
In the Hebrew word, kill is still kill, but we define it murder because what it intended by saying that word is murder, not kill. And so when the Ten Commandments talks about, you shall not murder, the word is kill. But it doesn't mean all killing, because obviously killing animals is okay, right? Killing the trespasser, that is actually defensible,
Right.
in the Torah, right? And so what does it mean by kill? And so you need to put it in context. What does it mean by violence? And so by violence, I believe it is in reference to, well, let's put it this way. We read Romans 12, which referred back to Deuteronomy, the Deuteronomy passage, which is 32:35. Maybe you could read that though.
Deuteronomy 32:35 reads, "Vengeance is mine and recompense for the time when their foot shall slip, for the day of their calamity is at hand and their doom comes swiftly."
God is the one that handles vengeance. When you're violent because you need to exact vengeance, in a sense, what you're not doing is trusting God. You don't trust in His timing. You don't trust in His word, the surety of it, right? And so, well, maybe God won't punish him, so I got to do it. What if he confesses that Jesus Christ is Savior, and then I don't get to see him suffer? Whatever, I don't know. Whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And so you don't trust in God's providence. That's a huge sin. So when I act violently, what I mean when I call it a sin, what I mean is that you don't trust in God and you don't obey His commands, because He says, "Vengeance is mine." He's the one that will repay. And so that's what you have to trust. Now, that being said, I don't want to forego the nuance of how the sword is given to the government, meaning that even us as a private citizen, we don't do like vigilante justice. We don't go around thinking we're the Punisher, or whatever it is, whatever comic book you've read, or the Batman. He's considered vigilante, right? It's romantic to watch. But it's not something that every citizen could do. Otherwise, the streets would be chaos, right?
Mm.
And so we trust in God, and we know that one of the arms of, just our government is that branch where it can exact physical punishment on the wrongdoer.
What about violent video games? Violent TV shows, movies, playing violent sports like football. What about all of these different violent-esque things?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because, okay, let's go back to the origins of, let's say, the Olympic Games. What that actually did was, when you had like these nations or these groups of people compete each other in the Olympic Games, what it stayed was a lot of war. So what we don't see a lot of is war, because we actually let go a lot of that angst, those kinds of pressures and tensions from neighboring countries through competition. So it does promote good, in my opinion, but it is an imperfect means. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't herald football as like the golden thing of the Christian age. I don't think that's what I would say, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's evil. And I think it's okay to enjoy entertainment from time to time. I think there are some concerns when it comes to certain sports, whether it's too dangerous, whether it's too injury prone. And that's something that people will talk about, right? If there's no longevity in this competition, isn't it the same as killing people? Then why don't we just go back to killing people?
Right.
And so because we don't want to go back to that, we want to make it competitive, but not as lethal as, killing people. And so I think some of those things are good. So there is some nuance that I want to bring in when you ask a question like that. I know some people just don't like football. I'm not in that camp. And some people just absolutely love football. Like, we'll see football in heaven. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I think it has a purpose, and its purpose is just what I stated before.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And I think this is really helpful for all of us especially people that might think, hey, I don't get angry, I just get annoyed, or I just get frustrated, I just get upset. They're all really the same word to talk about different severities of anger. Like
we
you
could
said.
combine the last one and this one. Hanger.
Hangry. Yeah.
We did talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a double sin then.
Or irritated. Irritability.
You're annoyed because you're hangry.
Which makes you angry when you just think about it.
Yeah.
It's like a quadruple sin.
I think hangry is real. It's a real thing, and it's really a bad thing. But as we close up this episode, I have one quick Q&A that we can get to.
We need a beat.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
And this one was a very interesting one, very historical. So thank you. The question reads, Queen Elizabeth was hailed as a faithful Queen of England and a woman of faith. She was head of the Anglican Church. As we all know, the monarch is the head of the Anglican Church in England. However, the news has been and currently continues to show her grandchildren and children's infidelity and seeming lack of faith. Is this a result of her job/duty to the country over keeping the household? What was her faithful duty to her household in light of her royal position? This is a very interesting question.
Yeah, it's complex, I suppose. I think we could simply put it, the simple answer would be you do what you can do. And after the child is of independent age, you can't be responsible for whatever sin they committed. You raised them wrong. I don't know. But you're not going to be put into jail or to be held in account for what the child does at the time, because he's going to be or she's going to be responsible for her own actions at the time. But if they're underage, they're under your care, then you are responsible for their actions. So let's say someone's 13 and they rob a store. Yeah, you'll be held responsible. You'll have to pay the penalty and, reimburse whatever damages or property has been stolen and whatnot. When it comes to Queen Elizabeth, I think the question itself stands out because of the position that she had and because of the way the Anglican Church works. Like historically, the Anglican Church was there because they broke off. And instead of going into the general Protestant Reformation, they built their own church where this time the king or the monarch would be the head of the church. And so, in a sense, she is, or the queen was considered the church leader, if not very least a church leader, right? And so, in what ways does she bear responsibility over the outcomes of her children? Because what we see in the media is that her children are a mess, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not really William. Is William also a mess? He seems like the model child.
I thought there were some issues.
I mean,
Like the
Harry's the problem
The
child.
whole Epstein Island thing. Wasn't he on the list?
No, that's Charles.
Oh.
That's her son.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know the list yet, so this is all speculation. But the speculation is because he was found. This is not news that nobody knows. This is out there because he was found to be not of upright character. Let's say
Yeah.
that the queen did put some restrictions on him and his access, and so that's actual historical fact. So she did what she could. I don't know exactly what more she could have done or what less she could have done. I don't know the details of the family, what they know, what they don't know, or what went on behind closed doors. So, what is the question really asking again?
It's what was her duty to her household in light of her position? And I think this could be really relating to any other type of job as well. When your family and your job kind of are at a conflict, what is your priority and how do you handle that? So for example, even for pastors, I've heard of pastors that have stepped down from ministry because they couldn't make time to spend with their family. Their relationship with their family was not going the way that it should be as an elder, as a father, as a husband. And so they stepped down from ministry. Is that what needs to be done for your job and your family? How do you do that?
Yeah, I see it in in a slightly different light. So a lot of people try to compartmentalize their occupation with their, let's say, their duties as a father.
Yeah.
So I think it's all somehow connected. And let me just explain it by saying this. If you are a father and you're called to be an elder, those things are in line with each other. You have to be a good father. If you're not a good father, you will be a bad elder. And so if you are an elder and your fatherly duties are being neglected, then you need to step up and complete those fatherly duties. I think the first go-to that people want to hear is that he should let go of his eldership. I don't think that's the case. An elder's an elder. Do the fatherly duties. And then if you can't do it, if there's no way you could do it, your house is such a mess, there's no way you could get it in order, then yeah, you can't be an elder. Like there's no way, because your elder responsibilities will not like function well. It
Yeah.
just won't. Like how can you take care of the church when you can't even take care of those that are closest to you, around you, your family? And so that's why people say your priority is your family. I think that's the answer a lot of people were probably expecting. Your duty is everything. All that God has given you, your priority, you can say, simply put, is your family, but it doesn't mean it's completely disconnect. So I don't like the disconnect between you being a family man and you being a church man. They're all connected. And so if you're a bad father, you will not be a good elder, 100%. If you are a bad elder, I can say you're probably a bad father, but
Yeah.
not necessarily. So it doesn't necessarily flow inversely. But I can surmise that there may be some problems at home. So you definitely don't want to be a bad elder in that sense. So there are people who said that people were terrible bosses, who were just like overly dictatorial. You know, it was like they were living in some kind of communist regime when they're working for some boss. You can tell their family life is probably not like a free marketplace of ideas either. Then, you know, either family life, there's something wrong then, because the expression comes out. So family is the most concentrated form of where people see you every day, and your philosophy and ideology will play out the most there. And from then on, it comes out. So that disconnect between elder and you being a father shouldn't be that great. Honestly, it's connected. So the way someone pastors or leads, I can pretty much generally tell how they're a father. But if you have a father, you'll definitely know how he'll be as an elder. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
I mean,
you.
so going back, let me go back to the Queen Elizabeth thing. Queen Elizabeth is someone to be, I think, in my personal opinion, revered. First of all, she liked corgis, and that's my favorite dog.
Oh.
Every time she met someone, I've heard stories that she always proselytizes. She always tells them about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Do I agree with the Anglican Church and its like tenets? Not all of them. Their government, not really. But it doesn't mean that what I believe is perfect either. And so, because she is where she is, I think she made do with what she had, and quite remarkably well. And so I think she is someone that we can hold up in reverence. And the fact that her children aren't necessarily turned out all that great or spectacular is something I think the questioner probably asked because there is a level of that disappointment and even maybe grief, because she was such a wonderful figure. Why isn't her children playing out this kind of example that she set? First of all, she's not the only parent, right? There's dad. Where is he? You know, that kind of thing. What role did he play? And secondly, I would say after a while, all the things that we know about a public family's life, right? The public life of a family, I should say, are not everything. It's not everything. So there may be things that we don't know. I do know the extremes, though. The extreme could be like someone like Harry, Prince Harry, right? He's an extreme case, but not every person in that family is a Harry, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily judge the family by what Harry did. And so those are things that I would also keep in mind when, thinking about that family. In the end, the good of the family is the good of the country. So you really want the family to do well because I want the UK to do well. And so those are things that I probably would keep in mind.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And thank you for that question. Please keep them coming. We've actually been receiving a lot of questions as of late. And so we appreciate that.
Yeah, I wonder if you're listening and we got a question we didn't answer, if we're just simply ignoring it.
We're not.
Yeah, we're just trying to find the time and medium to do it.
Right,
so
right,
we
right.
may even release a second podcast
Wow.
where it's I haven't told Sam, so it's weird for me
Yeah,
to say.
this is weird for me. I
This
don't know what you're
I
going to
was
say.
thinking about 333.
Oh, I don't know what that means.
Yeah. So 3 Q&As, 3 news headlines.
Wow.
And 3 theological subjects real quick in short order. So just do 333 and then boom, do a 15 to 20 minute podcast on all 3.
That's I think Chunseok is really interested in doing that one. So thank you, Chunseok. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we have a discussion on envy. Envy is kind of crazy because like you could be envious of me and it's a sin.
Because you're going to Texas.
Yeah, that's true. It's going to be.
No, you're back from Texas.
Yeah, I am. I'm
Oh,
back.
yeah.
I'm back. It was great. So this is going to be exciting. Tune in next week to find out, but don't be envious. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith.
Peace.